Hello and welcome to another Mr. Carter Science Special. This video will be all about negative feedback. As always, keep your eye on the syllabus references as we go through the video. So here we've got a person playing a guitar in front of a set of speakers. In fact, this is Slash from Guns N' Roses. And if you've ever been to a concert, you will have probably experienced at some point something called positive feedback. So what's happening at that concert? Well, what happens is when the guitar player plays the string will vibrate and create a sound wave, and that sound wave is turned into an electronic signal sent along the wires to the amplifier. The amplifier will then make that sound louder and transmit it to the speakers, and the speakers will project the sound and transmit the sound out to the audience. But if the guitar player stands in front of those speakers, then the sound waves from the speakers will go back to the guitar strings and vibrate them even more at a higher frequency and with stronger vibrations. That makes a louder and higher pitch sound. Well, that higher pitch, louder sound is sent back into the amplifier, which sends the sound back to the speakers even louder, which has an even greater effect on the string. So the sound keeps getting louder and louder and louder and higher and higher and higher pitch, and you hear this characteristic sound. That's known as positive feedback. Now, in your body, positive feedback very rarely happens. You only really get positive feedback during childbirth, where the muscles in the uterus wall will contract, and then through a positive feedback mechanism, the contractions will continue to increase in strength until the child is born. In your body, most of the time, what we're interested in is keeping a constant internal environment. Now that's known as homeostasis, where the body needs things to be the same all the time. The same temperature, the same amount of water in your blood and in your cells, the same amount of salt, and the same amount of blood sugar are just a few examples. So these systems where we need to keep a constant internal environment is controlled by negative feedback. Homeostasis is controlled by negative feedback. So what is negative feedback? Well, if I drew a line here to state the normal levels in your body of whatever it is we happen to be looking at, the salt concentration, water concentration, blood glucose concentrations, whatever it is, this would be a normal level. But your body is unable to ever maintain a completely normal level. So what will happen is, as the particular factor increases, the body will kick in and a mechanism will come into play that will decrease the levels. And the levels will keep going down until we get too low, when another mechanism from the body will kick in and increase the levels of whatever it is we're measuring. So your levels will constantly go up and down around this particular average. That's the normal level. So let me just repeat that. If the amount of something increases, the body will react to find some kind of mechanism to try and allow the amount of that substance to decrease. But if it gets too low, a different mechanism will kick in, which will act to increase the level again, and so on and so forth, constantly increasing and decreasing around an average normal. Negative feedback. As something gets too high, it will then lower. If it gets too low, it works out and it goes up again. So let's look at a quick example of negative feedback. And the example we're going to use is thyroxine. Now, just a word of warning, thyroxine will not appear on your exams if you're studying the International Edexcel versions of the biology course, but it will appear on your course if you are studying AQA or UK Edexcel. So, thyroxine. So thyroxine is a hormone that's produced by the thyroid gland in your neck, and thyroxine will control the basal metabolic rate of the body. Thyroxine plays an important part in growth and development. The basal metabolic rate is a measurement of how quickly chemical reactions occur within your body, how quickly substances can be broken down or built up, how much oxygen your tissues use, and how the brain of a growing child develops are all examples of a metabolic rate. In adults, the amount of thyroxine is kept constant by a negative feedback, and this is an example of homeostasis. Thyroxine levels are controlled by the pituitary gland and a hormone called TSH, thyroxine stimulating hormone. So how exactly does this negative feedback system work in the example of thyroxine? Well, thyroxine here, if we look on this diagram down at the bottom, if the thyroxine levels in the blood fall to lower than normal, then this is picked up and detected by the hypothalamus region of the brain. And the hypothalamus will produce a chemical called THR, which travels up to the pituitary gland and stimulates the pituitary gland to produce TSH, thyroxine stimulating hormone. This hormone will travel in the blood to the thyroid gland, telling the thyroid gland to produce more thyroxine. Now, if that will then mean that the level of thyroxine in the blood will actually increase, concentration will increase. And when that happens, this increase in thyroxine will be detected by the hypothalamus in the brain, and the hypothalamus will stop producing THR, which means that there will be less THR traveling to the pituitary gland, which will produce less TSH, and therefore the thyroid gland will reduce or stop producing thyroxine, and therefore the concentration of thyroxine in the blood will decrease, and this will be picked up by the hypothalamus, and so on. It will be a continuous cycle of turning on and producing more thyroxine, or turning off and producing less thyroxine, depending on how much is detected in the blood by the hypothalamus. Now think about everything I've just gone through with that diagram and consider a more similar diagram here discussing how thyroxine changes and the negative feedback system that controls it. Pause the video at this point and consider and copy out and complete this gap fill to show yourself the learning that you have achieved so far in this video. So let's have a look at some of the answers then. As the amount of thyroxine decreases, this will stimulate the hypothalamus to produce TRH. TRH stimulates the pituitary gland to produce the hormone TSH, and TSH will stimulate the thyroid gland to produce thyroxine. The levels of thyroxine in the blood will then increase, and this will stimulate the hypothalamus to stop producing TRH. So the pituitary gland is not stimulated to produce TSH, so the thyroid gland is not stimulated to produce thyroxine, and this causes the levels of thyroxine to fall. And when the thyroid levels of thyroxine decrease, the whole cycle starts again. I hope you've enjoyed this video on negative feedback. I hope that you have learned something. Please don't forget to like and subscribe to these videos and send me some comments so I know how much you're enjoying them and what you're learning from each video. Thank you very much for your time.